Welcome back to the end of the world. And so I've been doing some silly stuff over the last few weeks, probably a month or so. So you'll see in this video some rather silly kind of things, but the main kind of theme of this week is logistics and item control. Before we get started, I just wanted to show you this stupid little feature I added. A friend of mine did this probably about 30 years ago on the Amiga. And so I kind of, I was bored one day and figured I'd do the same thing in Unreal Engine. So it's just a little bit of a sort of kind of a state machine driven text processor. So I'll show you that now before we get on to the main logistics stuff. So what you're seeing here is the start of the logistics system, which is essentially a volume that you can store things in. So if you look, I've got an inventory inside the logistics storage volume, and when you run the game, it packs the items that you've got in your inventory into storage boxes. And so the idea is that you can manipulate the different inventories to increase or decrease the items. I originally sort of thought of this as a set of shelves and went through quite a few different design iterations. But ultimately, what this does is efficiently show, I mean, obviously the sort of art is temporary, but it shows that there's items in the world, right? And you'll have a shelf stacking system that you'll be able to sort of automate and things like that. And so you'll see here that there's a bunch of different types of volumes, and this is one of the boxes that things get packed in. So that box itself has got a storage volume in it as well. So you can think of it as like a set of sort of volumes that you use to store things in. So keep that in mind when we're looking at the other stuff. So what you're seeing here is one of these storage volumes, but it's attached to a thing called a conveyor, a logistics conveyor. And so the conveyor's job, as with most automation games, is to take things from storage and move it along a spline. So if you see the sort of white box here, that's what we call a node in the logistics system. So conveyors convey things between nodes, and nodes can have different types of logic applied to them. And so what you'll see is that the conveyors essentially transfer items along them, and once they reach a storage, they get stored, right? And so you see the tomatoes building up there. Here's the aubergines. So this particular node that I'm going to stand on, you see that it's got three outputs. That's what we call a node sorter. So the idea is that I haven't done the interface for it yet, but you'll be able to edit the outputs of each particular node sorter, so you can have multiple outputs and then sort items automatically. So you'll see that the carrots have just gone along a different conveyor as well. Ignore the blue block of things for now. So that's one thing that I implemented, is the conveyor node graph. It forms a graph. So let's talk about the little blue locker things, because that's something I've just been working on recently. So the conveyors convey items between storages, and you can run different logic on the nodes in the graph. But I've been working on this thing called a digital twin. So the sort of foundations for doing digital twin work in my other job as a researcher. And so I wanted to implement something in Unreal Engine using what they call this mass entity system, which is a way of sort of implementing large scale like crowds, but also, like having lots and lots of objects doing things without necessarily having really bad performance. And so this is the start of that. And you can see that what they're essentially doing is they're doing the same job as a conveyor. They're taking a thing off a conveyor, an item, and transporting it to this storage volume. So they'll just keep ping-ponging backwards and forwards. It's not particularly well documented, this system, so it's actually quite challenging to be able to do it. I kind of get the basic idea because I've done these kind of systems, these entity component systems myself in the past, but it does take quite a lot of messing around to try and figure out how to make it work fully. So there's probably a few things that aren't obvious in this system. So there are obviously still bugs in that tomato. The first tomato should not be separated that far apart. So one thing is that it is a proper conveyor, but each conveyor's got its own speed. And this is, very typical of automation games, right? I'm not claiming that there's anything particularly novel in this system right now. But I'm hoping to eventually get to that point where there's something a little bit new with this kind of stuff. I was greatly inspired by the idea of just like trying to recreate like Amazon warehouses and things, because the sort of underground bunker, the size of the sort of storage spaces you could have, mean that like automation's generally going to be the sort of end game goal, right? So what I really wanted to do is have like really large stockpiles of stuff kind of moving through your underground bunker and allowing you to sort of allocate that to other people and how the transportation network works and that kind of thing. Eventually, through the digital twin stuff, I'll also have things like pipeline flows and sensors and a lot of that kind of data-driven stuff. So you'll be able to set up pipe networks and pipe things like, oil and gas and oxygen and whatever else, right? So there's, it's kind of non-trivial doing these kind of things because you have to be aware of things like performance characteristics, making sure that your entities kind of, are performance driven. So the idea is that each one of these sort of objects is represented by a mesh, but shouldn't like take up huge amounts of processing time and that kind of thing. So you see here, I'm kind of messing around with the nodes in the network, and it's using a procedural generation component to create the actual splines between the nodes. So the conveyors are represented as splines. They're not properly finished yet because obviously the trajectories of the spline outputs and stuff still doesn't look quite right. But the basics are there, right? Like I can iterate on that relatively quickly. But this is kind of a global scale thing, right? You will have perhaps hundreds of thousands of these conveyors, not hundreds of thousands, sorry, hundreds of thousands of items going across a huge network of conveyors. I want to basically make something sort of satisfactory scale, which as a solo dev is relatively challenging. So, but that's the aim, right? Something kind of like a bit more unique. as well. So I want you to be able to see the impact of your shelves filling up and then your shelves getting depleted because you're sending things out to other communities and stuff. So it's a proper sort of logistics system, right? A distribution system. So that's the sort of main aim of the automation stuff, is to allow you to send items out to communities above ground. And you, as the person below ground, has the control over that flow of items. So you can either be a benefactor, or you can just not do it and ignore it all.